Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Anarchy for Freedom, India's home for conspiracy research and free thinking. I can't overestimate the importance of today's video. It's one of the best pieces I've ever done in my almost a year of making content on this channel. And I would encourage you, if you appreciate my work and you like what I've done till now, please, as a favor for me, share this with everyone you know, especially influential people in India, because the importance and urgency of this information is really, really high, and every Indian needs to know this so that we can do something about the fascist lockdowns that we're facing right now. I'd recommend, this is a long interview, listen to it twice if you want because it's jam-packed with detail. Take notes, and without further ado, let's begin. Hello everyone. Today we're joined by a person who I found online while I was doing my research into the Gates Foundation's influence in India and how they have been influencing a lot of things behind the scenes as with respect to the current coronavirus crisis and the stuff that has happened in the past. And I was really surprised to come across Kapil because this was like literally the first journalist I came across in India who has been talking about a lot of the things that I discuss on my channel, and especially the role of the Gates Foundation since 2011, 2012 at the least. So I'll let Kapil introduce himself because I think he'd do more justice than I would. So Kapil, thank you so much for coming on, and why don't you let viewers know your background and who you are?
Thank you, Johan. Thank you for having me on your program. So I've been a journalist since for about, in fact, 20 years now. So I have been in and out of jobs for the last many years now. So I'm no longer working for any media organization for many years now. But I have had about 12 years of experience of working with the PTI, Press Trust of India, working with Business Today magazine and other organizations. So I also had a stint as a bit of an activist, as a local democracy activist and RT activist. So that is my experience, and so I've been kind of combining my journalism with a bit of activism, and my experience with of writing for PHFI actually relates to both my experience as a journalist as well as my experience as an activist, because this is something that I did outside my any regular media employment. I actually wrote a blog, very long blog. The first blog that I wrote on PHFI, that was in March 2011. So, and then I wrote more, a series of articles from 2011 to 2012. And in 2012, I stopped writing on PHFI because I was kind of frustrated with the fact that nobody was actually paying heed to these articles. There weren't much, there weren't many views of that. And in any case, overall public health people, the public health activists, the public health community, they, to me, they were totally supine. They were completely not plugged into what was happening to the whole public health administration and public health sector in India. So I stopped writing on PHFI in 2012. But overall, I wrote for 20 months, right from February 2011 to, I think, October 2012. And the last article I wrote was in October 2012, which I did not publish then, which was incomplete, in fact, but then I published it later in 2014. And then again, in 2018, I was contacted by some people whom I would describe as whistleblowers from PHFI. One was a PHFI guy, and another was another public health person. And then again, I wrote about PHFI in 2018. I resumed writing on PHFI. And so that was an article which was published in 2018, in February 2018. And then after this pandemic struck India, and we had this whole destruction of democracy and society in India for the last now 4 months, I again, connected my experience of, writing for PHFI and all the investigative articles, long articles, series of articles that I wrote for PHFI. I connected that experience with what is happening now in India with respect to this whole, global health imperialism of Gates Foundation, of other such foundations, and all these globalist criminals, including, this World Economic Forum and US universities, this which are involved in this Event 201, etc., and WHO. And then I connected my experience, all my investigations, all my findings with this. And then I found that, wow, this is something that I could have anticipated long back, which unfortunately I did not go down that road of actually investigating the role of Gates Foundation in India, which I should have done actually right from 2011. But the fact remains that I am the only one who actually investigated this whole criminal racket of PHFI, Public Health Foundation of India, which is embedded right inside the Government of India, the central government, and which is the racket that Bill Gates set up. It was actually promoted by the Gates Foundation and with the help of the Government of India, the Manmohan Singh government, and a number of other high net worth individuals from India, from the US, and US universities, including also Rockefeller Foundation. Very importantly, Rockefeller Foundation was involved right from the start. Lincoln Chen has always been the board members, the founding board member of PHFI. So they are the ones, these globalist criminals that I call them, are the ones who have been involved in setting up PHFI, an absolutely illegal and unlawful body, and I would call it a criminal body. And I can explain that why I would say that. So they set up this body, and body was implanted into Government of India in 2006. And this is the body that is can also be described as some kind of executive committee of India's billionaires. Executive committee of India's billionaires. And the executive committee is a word that Marxists use for, the government itself. In the Marxist theory, they say that, what is the government in a capitalist society? A government is actually the executive committee of the capitalist, which is actually working for the interest of the capitalist. Now, the closest that comes to this Marxist conception of an executive committee is actually this PHFI, because you look at the people who are represented on the governing board of the PHFI. You have all the billionaires, all the prominent billionaires. You have Ratan Tata, Ratan Tata is actually represented now by the chairman of the PHFI, Ram Durai, who is a Tata man, who was at the helm of TCS, Tata Consulting Services, for very long. And there's another Tata man on the PHFI board at the moment. So Tata is represented. You have Mukesh Ambani. Mukesh Ambani is represented. Was there on the board initially, but he's no longer there. But he's represented by, I think, by R. Mashelkar, who's a Reliance man. R. Mashelkar was also, the former Secretary of the Government of India. He was the chief of the CSIR, Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. He was one of the kind of frontmen who actually registered PHFI and set up PHFI along with Rajat Gupta of McKinsey and Ashok Alexander of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, etc. So you have Tata represented on the PHFI board. You have Mukesh Ambani represented on the PHFI board. You have Narayan Murthy of Infosys represented on the PHFI board. Narayan Murthy has been the PHFI chairman twice. Then you have Nandan Nilekani was represented on the PHFI board by Rohini Nilekani, who is his wife. Then you have all the others, big billionaires of India. All of them represented on the PHFI board. Mahindra was the chairman of PHFI once, I think in 2014 or 15. So you name it, all the big billionaires of India are actually represented on the PHFI board. So if there's one body, now can we name any other body? Of course not. So there's one body, and this body is implanted right inside the Government of India, which means it has all the government power. It is more powerful than the Ministry of Health. I mean, if you file an RTI or if you file an RTI about PHFI with the Government of India, it will go directly. No person in the Ministry of Health will actually touch this or respond to your RTI. It will go directly to the PHFI. So that is the kind of authority PHFI enjoys in the Government of India. If you file a complaint against PHFI India, against any wrongdoing of PHFI, you will find that this complaint will be directly forwarded to the PHFI. That is the kind of clout that PHFI enjoys in the Government of India. That's why I've called it the deep state. So for the last 3-4 months that I have been blogging about PHFI through this whole pandemic fraud, I have described it as the deep state of India. Because this is the body which has been, pulling the strings. This is the body which has been influencing all the events in India related to public health and the activities of the Gates Foundation, the activities of these globalist criminals, health imperialists, medical imperialists. So, and then, of course, there are a number of revolving doors between PHFI, Government of India, WHO, and IHME, which is Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation, another body, a fraudulent body set up by the Gates Foundation, which actually gave these fraudulent, epidemiological models on which these, genocidal lockdowns were based in the United States, in India, and elsewhere. So a number of health organizations which have direct connections with the Gates Foundation, and there's hardly any health organization now in the world which doesn't have a connection with the Gates Foundation, which hasn't received some kind of funding, some kind of support from the Gates Foundation. And so the number of revolving doors that I've explored since 2011 between PHFI and other organizations. And I continue to do so now that I have a new perspective on PHFI, which is that this is the body which was actually set up to pave the way for this kind of seismic events of global importance, like what we are witnessing now, which is a global coup d'etat, I would say, of the Gates Foundation and other globalist criminals to actually impose a kind of global medical imperialism on the world. And then this global medical imperialism then, pans out into an imperialism which actually encompasses all aspects of your life, not just health, not just public health, but all, and which is now can be seen on the World Economic Forum's website of in terms of the material that they have put up as a Great Reset. Now they are calling it the Great Reset. So this whole pandemic fraud now has gone into this overall scenario of what kind of recasting of human life is being done or planning is being done by these globalist criminals in terms of the global reset, the Great Reset that they are talking about. All the videos are there, the material is there on the WF website. And WF website, you must remember, was actually the one which collaborated with Gates Foundation in conducting that simulation. Late in 2019, Johns Hopkins University, WEF, and the Gates Foundation were the ones who actually conducted the simulation of the pandemic, before the pandemic actually struck. So it's like a dress rehearsal that they conducted in New York, and the same WEF is now talking about the Great Reset of completely recasting the human life as we know it, and completely not just recasting the human life, but recasting the human beings in themselves, trying to, create some new kind of species out of human beings. They say it very openly in their website that, the whole idea of human being as a natural concept is going to change forever. So which means we are going to be genetically engineered as a species. All our human interactions, all our social interactions are going to be changed. We are going to be merged with machines. So there's going to be a merger of human beings and machines, which is also known as transhumanism, and which is a vision that they actually are talking very openly about. So this is what uh, my long introduction and overall the evolution of all these ideas since 2011.
Wow, there's so much to unpack there, and there's so much I wholeheartedly agree with, and I can back up with my own research as well. Firstly, I would say that the way I've understood this is looking into the Gates Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, and others. At least the Rockefeller Foundation has been working in India ever since the British left, and they have basically continued the eugenics plans just under the name of population control and family planning, and they've been involved since the start from influencing our health research. But you spoke about the billionaire club that has sort of implanted itself within the PHFI, and I can say this from my own research that the Tatas, Nilekani, all the names you mentioned, the Ambanis and all, they have big connections with the deep state, going back a long time. For example, Ambani sort of had sat on the board at least of the Council on Foreign Relations, which was a sort of offshoot body of the Roundtable Secret Society set up by Rothschild frontman Cecil Rhodes. The Tatas actually were the ones who helped bring the Rockefellers and the Rockefeller Foundation into India. And if you see also a lot of the work that this NGO complex does, like I've come across so many projects where the Gates Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, Tata Trust, Ambani's NGO, they all work in concert to basically push the globalist agenda on the world. And if you see Gates' statements, you spoke about the event 201 that took place. But this is a familiar thing you'll find when you're investigating many false flags. Like even on the morning of 9/11, there were simulations like exactly modeling, planes going into the World Trade Center. Like there's one simulation exactly modeling that. So these are kind of hints and clues we can pick up of predictive programming within the media, as well as simulations that take place right before the event happens and then the event goes live. We see this with many false flag terror events, and this is something we saw now as well. I was seeing Gates' speech, I think, at Niti Aayog from 2016, where he was sort of, it's a long one and he connects many of the points we're talking about. Obviously, in Orwell speak, he doesn't really say what they mean. They sort of cover it up in fancy language. But to us who are initiated and who know how to read it, we can basically see through what he's saying. And he was warning then that the biggest sort of health risk at the Niti Aayog conference was a deadly sort of epidemic outbreak. And this was back in, I think, 2016 or 2017. So from what I understand, the Gates Foundation has basically worked with the UN along with the Rockefellers and the other globalists to draft the sustainable development, which is nothing but a really innocuous term for the total transformation of the planet. They've helped draft Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 in place, which is their plan to basically control the whole world through a world government in the name of sustainable development and saving the environment. They basically want to control every aspect of life and create a really feudalistic kind of system. So, what I hear the Gates Foundation and stuff speaking, when they're implementing the plans in India, they say that we're just helping the Indian government achieve their goals. But if you actually sort of read little more behind the scenes, the Indian government has adopted the sustainable development goals, which were formulated and pushed on the world by the UN, which is controlled by the same globalists. So the government has basically signed up to them, and then these different offshoots of the same cabal come in and help the government to basically implement their plans. So, obviously, there's a lot for viewers to go into here, but let's just start at the initiation of PHFI. Let's start from the basics, like what is PHFI and what was it set up to do really? And also let's go into the founding a little bit, because as you spoke, Bill Gates was involved, but our 65 crores of our taxpayer money was infused into PHFI. And we know that a known fraud called Rajat Gupta, who's been involved with other Gates spin-offs like the Global Fund for Tuberculosis, AIDS and Malaria, which itself has been drowning in scandals and swindling a lot of money. And it has a big sort of history, which I don't want to go into now. But, if you can maybe talk about your meeting that you had with Rajat Gupta, which you were telling me, early on when you were just starting this, and maybe just give some more detail about what the PHFI was exactly set up to do since the beginning.
Okay. So I was working as a senior correspondent for Business Today magazine. It's a fortnightly magazine of the India Today group in 2007. And that was when one of my editors actually called me to his desk, and he told me that Rajat Gupta of McKinsey is in town. So why don't you go meet him? And he has set up some foundation for promoting public health in India. So he wants to talk about that. So so that is when I actually, looked into what is PHFI, Public Health Foundation of India, and also about what Rajat Gupta has been doing. So before I actually went for the meeting, and the first thing that struck me about PHFI was that it was set up a year before. I'm talking about 2007, so a year before it was set up in 2006. So the first thing that struck me was, what kind, is it some public kind of body, or is it some private body, or what? So it was neither of it. Actually, it was neither a public body nor a private body. And I couldn't actually see anything in terms of some kind of contract that the government may have signed with all these people. So it was described as a multi-stakeholder public-private partnership. So multi-stakeholder means you have many stakeholders, then it is a public-private partnership. So PPP was a word that was actually emblazoned across all the promotional material of PHFI. And of course, the fact that the Manmohan Singh himself actually launched this organization in March 2006. So that is something that was their only point to highlight, to advertise. But we are launched by the Prime Minister himself, so we are great. I mean, it's like that. Otherwise, there was no background to public health, nothing. So you have Rajat Gupta, who was a McKinsey head. So what does he have to do with public health? Nothing. Then you have others, guys like Mukesh Ambani, who was sitting on the board, and others. So what do they have with public health? Nothing. So so this is a kind of question that I had. So what is this whole business of public-private partnership? And that is what I asked him about when I met him in that meeting. So that meeting took place in Delhi. So they had a rented office in one of the one of the buildings owned by a business chamber in South Delhi. So I met them there, and I was ushered into a conference room by a very hefty guy who looked like some kind of bouncer, and he actually finally he acted as a kind of bouncer after the end of the meeting. So first came this guy, K. Srinath Reddy. So K. Srinath Reddy has been the founding president of PHFI. He was a AIMS cardiologist who was also a doctor, official doctor of Manmohan Singh as Prime Minister, and in UPA1. So he was made the president of PHFI initially on a deputation or secondment from AIMS to the PHFI. And the chairman was Rajat Gupta of McKinsey. So Rajat Gupta was a darling of business press because he was, I think, the first Indian head of the managing director of the global consulting firm McKinsey. And therefore he was glorified in the business press. Most business journalists, including myself, knew about him. So this meeting started with Reddy, who came first, and then came Rajat Gupta. So my line of questioning was about this PPP business. What is this PPP business? Public-private partnership. Because, governments are accountable because they are democratically elected. So they're accountable to the parliament, they're accountable to the CAG, our auditor, the public auditor. They're accountable to the laws of the land, to the right to information, for example, which was actually came into force in 2005. So there are systems of accountability for the government, and that's why we say we call it public health. This whole business of government, making policies about the health of the people. And that's why it's public health. So it's accountable to the public. But then what do you guys have to do with, with public health? Because you are not accountable to the people. And have you made yourself accountable to the people? So these are the kind of questions that I asked about the PPP thing, the PPP concept. And he became very angry, very het up, very riled by these questionings, this line of questioning. And so this meeting actually ended up when Rajat Gupta came and I actually began my line of questioning, and he became angry. And this meeting was actually then ended very abruptly by Reddy. Reddy was sitting there. And one thing I remember Rajat Gupta telling me was this. I mean, he sounded so arrogant, as if the entire authority of recasting the entire public health system of India has been actually given to him. The responsibility is now lies with him, and he's the guy who will handle now all the things. So that is the kind of arrogance that I saw in him, which actually startled me. And so he said, we cannot, at that time, the government of India was setting up this National Rural Health Mission, a very ambitious program. And they were setting up these, talking about having 6 lakh, grassroots health workers called ASHAs, which is accredited social health activist, ASHA, ASHAs. So they were having, they were saying we should have about 6 lakh ASHAs across the country, etc. So he said, we cannot create 6 lakh, we cannot train 6 lakh ASHAs. I mean, this is what Rajat Gupta told me. We cannot train 6 lakh ASHAs, but we can train the trainers who will train the ASHAs. So I thought as if the whole contract of, creating these 6 lakh, the cadre of 6 lakh ASHAs has been given to Rajat Gupta. That is the kind of feeling I got. So the arrogance with which he spoke to me was startling. And then when I later discovered that, the Manmohan Singh, what Manmohan Singh said at the launch, he actually gave the carte blanche to the PHFI. I mean, as if the whole public health policy formulation, as well as administration, as well as service delivery, and everything has been now given to the PHFI, which is controlled by the Gates Foundation. So that is the kind of hijacking that took place in 2006 itself by the Gates Foundation of India's public health administration. So that is, and who was Rajat Gupta? At that time, obviously, I did not realize that he is the henchman of Bill Gates. He was working for Bill Gates. He was actually at that time the, he was the chairman of the Global Development Program Advisory Panel of Gates Foundation, and an advisor to Bill Gates, and associated with the Gates Foundation in many other respects also. Also perhaps with WHO and all. So he was already plugged into this global health agenda of the Bill Gates Foundation. And he was a kind of henchman hired by Bill Gates to subvert the government of India through PHFI and, implant PHFI inside the government of India as a deep state, as a shadow government, which will decide the policy direction of India, health policy direction, as well as the entire administration, as well as also importantly creating the entire cadre of people across India, a whole network of people across India, which will perhaps support their future plans of imperialism of the kind that we are witnessing now, we are experiencing now.
And just to add to that, before you go ahead, I mean, that's exactly what we're seeing right now, because the Rockefeller Foundation is openly saying that they are working with ASHA workers right now to give them technology so that they can go door to door and basically, surveil people, test them, and then, take the necessary steps as possible. So, from where I'm sitting, I can see that they started laying the foundations for this kind of thing really long back, as you were suggesting as well. Yeah.
And the kind of honeycombing that they have done of India's public health sector and public health personnel, it's also evident in the supine and totally spineless response that Indians have now given, particularly the public health community and the doctors and the ICMR, Indian Council of Medical Research, the Medical Councils of India and all. I mean, they are totally supine. They are totally compliant with this globalist health agenda. Nobody is protesting. Nobody is demonstrating. Nobody is raising their voice now. So India is totally supine. And India is taking in all this nonsense. and all this globalist health, agenda, which has actually wreaked havoc with the Indian society, Indian democracy. So you can see the kind of honeycombing that they have done for the last 14 years since PHFI was implanted into Government of India. So now there are no voices of protest within the health community. No voices of protest. Even though when I began to investigate in 2011 about PHFI, I found that this whole public health sector has been dominated by the so-called leftist people, the people with communist leanings, people who belong to the universities like the JNU, like TIS, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, etc. So most of these health people were actually associated with this leftist thought. And they were also, initially PHFI, I came across articles also, critical articles, not very critical, but, critical in their own way, in their own scholarly, mealy-mouthed way, by these JNU academics, like Dr. Satyamala was one, Dr. C. Satyamala and others. And they were writing, why is it the Government of India is giving all this this kind of leeway into the public health sector to this Gates Foundation and McKinsey and all these multinational corporations, etc. So, but then now what we see is this. What we see that after this whole coup d'etat has been actually pulled off, there are no voices in India. So how is it that possible? Because, and the left always knew about the Gates Foundation designs in India. Because, I've come across also articles on global health imperialism published in some leftist kind of, published by some leftist kind of organization like RUPE, R-U-P-E, on very good articles on the Gates Foundation activities in India and elsewhere. But I find that even the leftists are silent now. So my feeling is that this is the honeycombing that has been done. Everybody is now beholden within the public health community. Everybody within the medical community. Everybody is beholden somehow to the either to the Gates Foundation and their various organizations funded by them, or to the government, which is now itself is honeycombed by the Gates Foundation. For example, ICMR. Now, ICMR. You look at ICMR is totally, absolutely. Hollowed out by the Gates Foundation. Now you see the COVID response of the Government of India. The committee that they have set up, which is actually coordinating their response to this so-called pandemic, it has K. Srinath Reddy, the president of PHFI, is one of the members. So he is inside that ICMR committee coordinating the Government of India's response to this pandemic. And he was, as I actually enumerated in my article back in 2011, he was in all the committees. Reddy was in all the committees. All the PHFI. PHFI was actually was in all the bodies of the health ministry, all the commissions, all the committees on the health, National Rural Health Mission. Then there was a commission on universal healthcare, which was actually the secretariat. PHFI was actually made a secretariat of this commission on universal healthcare of the Government of India. So PHFI was acting as a Government of India, totally unelected body, totally unaccountable body, and until 2011, it was not even actually compliant with the RTI Act. It has never been actually audited by the CAG. It has never been questioned or examined by the Parliament of India or any legislative body in India. So it continues to be an absolutely unaccountable body, unaccountable to the public. And they are sitting right inside Government of India on all the committees, all the important committees, deciding policy, and now also deciding this so-called the response of the government to this so-called pandemic. So that meeting, coming back to that meeting, so that meeting actually ended abruptly, and fast forward to 2011, because I actually then forgot about this. I was not doing public health. Public health is not one of the priorities for any business magazine. Nobody writes on public health, etc. So that story, I just came back from that meeting with Rajat Gupta and told my editor that this is what happened, and then nothing happened. And then after 3 months or so, I found that the same editor had written a glowing, article for Rajat Gupta. That Rajat Gupta has done this great, philanthropic work of setting up Public Health Foundation of India, and is doing amazing work in public health. And Rajat Gupta has been a beacon of hope for, as a inspiring person for all, the corporate India and all that. So then I realized that this meeting was actually set up, must have been asked by the PHFI, Rajat Gupta, of my editor, that, why don't you send one of your reporters and he can do it. They thought maybe it's a business magazine. They won't ask any critical questions. They won't ask anything about this whole fraud of PPPs. So that's why I was actually, asked to go for that meeting. And that meeting obviously did not turn out the way Rajat Gupta had planned. And then fast forward to 2011, when I had left this Business Today magazine, and I was working more as an activist, as somebody more who had newly acquired some sensibilities as an activist, as a democracy activist, etc. So in 2010 itself, I began to read news reports that Rajat Gupta is being investigated by the US prosecutors for some insider trading scam, galleon insider trading, which was a huge insider trading scam involving the top Wall Street companies like Goldman Sachs and P&G, Procter and Gamble, etc. So I was very surprised because here we have Rajat Gupta totally supported by the Prime Minister himself, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh himself, in setting up this racket called Public Health Foundation of India. And here he's being investigated for securities fraud in the US. So I thought, very strange that nobody's writing about it. Why is it that, all our reporters in the mainstream media, why are they not writing about it? I mean, it's a huge story. It's a beautiful story. As a business journalist, I could, give my left arm for this kind of story. So nobody was writing. And right from, March, I think 2010, he was being investigated and his name was coming up in the news reports and nobody was writing about it. So by the time we came to January, January 2011, I found that he might even be arrested for this galleon insider trading scam. And that's when I thought that I should write about it. And because even then I thought that maybe, there's no point writing because, somebody's going to do a story. Somebody's going to do a story. There's going to be a full, front page splash today or tomorrow or the day after. This is what I thought as a journalist. So my instinct said that somebody is going to write because, here you have a guy who is the chairman of Public Health Foundation of India as well as other organizations in India. He was also the chairman of EMRI, which is a PPP in southern states of, ambulance service PPP and other organizations also in India. So then I thought I would write about it. In February 2011, then I began writing about it. Because he was the chairman of PHFI, and within PHFI was actually had all the government directors. All the government representation also. Health Secretary was there on the PHFI board. This is what the PHFI website said. Later we would found that all these, no government officer has any authorization from the government to be sitting on the PHFI board. This is what we got, the response that we got to our RTI request, which means PHFI, the board itself is fraudulent because all the people who are supposed to be sitting, the government people, the health secretary and earlier, the planning commission deputy chairman Montek Singh Ahluwalia was sitting on the PHFI board, and all these people, the government people who were sitting, and Manmohan Singh's, the secretary himself, Nair, TK Nair, who was his, personal secretary, he was sitting on the PHFI board. So in 2011, all these government people were sitting on the PHFI board, and the chairman of the PHFI board was a guy who was being investigated for securities fraud. So I thought this is a great story. So why is it that Manmohan Singh is not pulling out all these people, and his own secretary at least, who is now working under a person who might be arrested and who might be convicted and jailed in a few months from now? So, and nobody has done this story until now. In 2010, we are now sitting in 2020, and no mainstream media has picked up this story. That, you know, and even after what Gates Foundation has been doing to India, nobody has actually picked up PHFI. People are maybe, even if people are talking about the Bill Gates, they're talking about the Gates Foundation, etc., and they're calling it all conspiracy theories and all. Nobody's examining PHFI, Public Health Foundation of India. So in February 2011, I began writing, and it took me about, I think, 3 or 4 weeks to complete this article and publish in March 2011. And this article is the most comprehensive I've done. I mean, the longest at least I've done on PHFI, a 5,000 word article, where I actually lay out all the connections, all the revolving doors that they have with the Government of India, how they have completely saturated all departments of the Government of India and bought off top bureaucrats, secretary level bureaucrats who are then working for PHFI. And this is true. You know, the kind of honeycombing that has taken place is amazing. Not just one ministry, which is Ministry of Health, also Ministry of Science and Technology, because CSIR was involved right from the beginning in the setting up of PHFI. R. Mashelkar was that fraudulent bureaucrat who actually took part in setting up PHFI along with Rajat Gupta, Ashok Alexander, and K. Srinath Reddy, etc. So there were more than one ministry actually involved in setting up PHFI, and they continue to be working for PHFI. Many of the bureaucrats are kind of on the payroll, I would say, for want of a better word, I would say they are on a kind of payroll of Bill Gates through PHFI. Like one example I've given, as late as 2018, we found that Ashok Sharma of one of the departments of the Ministry of, he was secretary level heads of one of the departments of the Ministry of Science and Technology. He was actually caught red-handed, striking a deal for PHFI with one of the medical schools in Kerala, in Trivandrum, Sri Chitra, Tribunal Institute. So I wrote an article in 2018 about that. So you can see they have corrupted Indian bureaucracy at the central level as well as in the state level, because right from the beginning, you also see a political consensus and elite consensus across the political spectrum in setting up this PHFI, which was built as a public-private partnership, as well as other public-private partnerships also. This whole culture of implanting this fraudulent idea of public-private partnership, you can see that there is a kind of elite consensus in India. So it's not just the UPA, which was led by Congress government, which was, involved in this setting up or implanting PHFI in government, but there are other parties like BJP. So Narendra Modi as Gujarat Chief Minister was on board right from the beginning. He gave land. So initially the plans of the PHFI were to set up 4 public health schools in India, in the north, in the south, in the east, and the west. So they set up, initially they had plans to set up one in Gandhinagar in Gujarat, one in Hyderabad in United Andhra Pradesh, one in Bhubaneswar in Odisha, and one in Delhi. So initially the state governments gave them land and financial help for setting up these public health schools, and they were set up. So in Gandhinagar, actually, they set up this school. Narendra Modi government gave him the land, the financial help, I think 25 crore of money, plus land, 40 acres of land, or 50 acres of land actually. And they also later, after Modi, became the prime minister, the government also actually gave them the university status. So that is the kind of help rendered to the PHFI. And central government and state government, of course, gave them many projects, lucrative projects in NRHM, National Rural Health Mission, and others. And they were making money. And all the trainings that they were doing a lot of trainings of the government servants. And that is another aspect of honeycombing. So not just, these ashas, they were actually turning the entire government machinery around. They were training these government servants, and apart from the fact that there was a revolving door, the government itself was deputing its own bureaucrats to PHFI. Like, Reddy himself was from AIMS, from a central cadre of, doctors, who was actually deputed to PHFI. So government itself was lending its own bureaucrats and lending its own public health experts to PHFI, which means that a body which had no experience in public health at all, zero experience, was actually built up by the government itself through government people and government funds and government resources, which had no credibility, no locus standi, no expertise to actually run public health, because they were, these were the people who were running public health, like Narayan Murthy or Rajat Gupta or Mukesh Ambani. What expertise do they have in running public health? Obviously nothing. So they were taking people from the government of India, either on deputation or poaching them or bribing them. And they were also corrupting the top bureaucrats by, giving them, for example, nobody knows for the last 14 years that has the government of India given any permission, any authorization to any of the bureaucrats, to health secretary, to the secretary of the, DGHS, to be sitting on the PHFI boards. And nobody knows anything about it. When we asked, there's no document in public domain where there's no authorization, no government order in public domain that says that yes, these bureaucrats have been authorized to be sitting on the PHFI board. So, and none of the meetings, none of the minutes of the meetings, nobody knows what happens in the board meetings of PHFI. Do these bureaucrats actually attend these meetings? Nobody knows. Because when you ask the government of India, the health ministry, give us the minutes of the meetings of these of the PHFI board, then they say that we don't have it, even though their so-called bureaucrats are supposed to be sitting on the PHFI governing board, but they say that we don't have those. So it's a totally untransparent body, a non-transparent body. Nobody knows what goes on inside PHFI, and absolutely unaccountable. So in 2018, I learned about this huge scam also in PHFI. Their funds were stolen. There was this FD scam. They put their funds in some bank in Mumbai, in public sector banks, and those funds were stolen, and around about 100 crore or something from their corpus. And
that would all be like most of our taxpayer money that was infused, right?
Obviously. The 65 crore, that initial support that the government of India gave to their corpus, plus other help. So the overall help would be in cash and kind, would be running into, perhaps thousands of crore, because many of the projects were granted exclusively to PHFI. And, very interestingly about this whole concept of public-private partnerships, something that I need to point out, that until now, the government of India does not have any policy of setting up PPPs in the health and education sector, which is also known as the social sector, so-called social sector in bureaucratic language. So government never had any policy for setting up PPPs in the social sector, in the health sector, and yet this PPP was set up. So somebody actually filed a RTI in 2011 with PHFI, because PHFI received government funding. So he said we should, get some answers under RTA from PHFI. So they refused to answer those questions. And then he went to the Chief Election Commission. And then Chief Election Commission called them. And I was asked to actually represent this RTA applicant. So I also went to the CIC. And there, PHFI was actually represented by about 5 people, including one of their lawyers. And he told the CIC, the Central Information Commissioner Shailesh Gandhi, that, there he had to admit that they are not a PPP, because I told you, there is absolutely no contract signed, which means that the government of India did not sign any contract, any concession agreement, which is required to be signed for something to be a PPP with these, Gates Foundation and other their partners. Absolutely nothing. So they were just set up just like that. Just like that. I mean, implanted into Government of India without any basis. And they kept, including Manmohan Singh, his ministers actually kept repeating this over and over again for many years that PHFI is a PPP, PPP, PPP. Even a parliamentary panel asked them some questions about PPP, and they lied to the parliamentary panel. So there's a huge amount of falsehood and fraud that actually committed by the Manmohan Singh government and his ministers about PPP. They try to misrepresent the true nature, the true purpose of PHFI, and they misled the parliament, they misled the public, they misled the parliamentary panels about the true nature and the true functions of the Public Health Foundation of India. So at the CIC, this Shailesh Gandhi, the Information Commissioner, asked them, so you have been advertising yourself as a PPP, so which means that you have taken from government, you have taken government help, you have taken government funds. So why don't you answer these questions? I mean, under Right to Information Act. So they said, sir, we are, the council, the lawyer for the PHFI said that we are not exactly a PPP. We are not exactly a public-private partnership. We are more like a public-private initiative. Now, what is public-private initiative? Nothing. So obviously, it means nothing. So they have been actually, they promoted themselves, they advertised themselves as a public-private partnership, which itself they were not. Because public-private partnership does have an official meaning in physical infrastructure, where the government is setting up these ports and airports and building roads, etc. Their public-private partnership has a legal meaning, a formal meaning. They are contractual relationship between the government and the private parties. But PHFI is not even that. So what they were actually advertising themselves. So their board is fraudulent, absolutely fraudulent, because government people who are sitting on their board are not authorized to be on their board. Absolutely no records exist in any of the departments of the Government of India which actually authorizes them to be on the board of the PHFI. So it's a fraudulent board.
And if I'm not mistaken, just to stop you one sec, I think I read somewhere in your articles that you mentioned that none of the government people who were supposed to attend the meetings actually attended them, right?
Yeah, because there are absolutely no records. So this is what we asked. In 2018, we filed an RTI. We asked them, can you give us some records of the government, your own government officials attending these meetings and what transpired in those meetings? And they said, we have absolutely no records. Health Ministry is saying. So Health Ministry, which is actually forwarding all the complaints directly to the PHFI without answering them, which is forwarding all the RTIs about PHFI directly to the PHFI without asking them, as if PHFI is some higher authority, higher than the Government of India. That Health Ministry is telling us that we have no records. And as many as 3 or 4, at least 2 or 3 or 4 officials of the Health Ministry itself have always been advertised to be on the board of PHFI. So if you go to the PHFI website and you see the constitution of their board, you will find that all the health secretary is there as an ex-officio member of the PHFI, DGHS Director General is there. So at least 3 or 4 officials of the Health Ministry as well as other departments of the Government of India are always on the PHFI board. And here the government, no ministry is taking responsibility. No ministry is saying, yes, our official is on the PHFI board and we'll give you the information. We'll take responsibility. No. They are acting as if they don't know what PHFI is up to, what they're doing. As if it's a higher authority and we are not supposed to even talk about it. So any complaint you file to the Health Ministry or to any other department of the government, or any RTI if you file, you are not going to get any answer from the government. That RTI will directly be passed on to the PHFI. And PHI will obviously give you some bullshit answer. So they won't answer your question. They will give you some nonsense. So this has been happening since. So, and all the authority it has, I mean, they're sitting on all the committees of the Government of India, all the official committees. Now you see the COVID. You even in the media, you see For the last 4 months, you can see, or you can check any TV channel, and they, for any discussion on this India's response to this pandemic and all this thing, one of their preferred talking heads is this guy, K. Srinath Reddy, the criminal president of the PHFI, and I call him criminal for a reason. So I just told you that their governing body is absolutely fraudulent, totally fraudulent. And nobody knows what goes on inside the governing body meeting, because none of the minutes of the meeting are actually in public. So if you go to the PHFI website, you won't find anything about what was actually happening inside those meetings for the last 14 years. So what was Bill Gates doing to India's public health policy and public health administration for the last 14 years? We don't know. It's a Bill Gates body. It's a deep state. Now, in 2012, when I was doing my investigative articles, one of my third in a series, or rather third in a series, third in a series in 2011 itself, actually. I filed an RTI, and I asked him, in 2012 actually, not 2011, I asked him about their governing board, the composition of their governing board prevailing in 2006, because I wanted to know how actually, who are the people who were actually there on the governing board in 2006 when Rajat Gupta actually set up this body. And he gave me a false document, ready, under RTI. And this document is part of an article which I published in Money Life magazine, which is a Bombay-based media organization run by Sucheta Dalal, who is a very well-known Padma Awardee journalist, and she published my article. She's one of the few people who actually published my article on PHFI, because mainstream media was totally, absolutely on board with these fraudsters, Gates Foundation and the government, etc. So that's why you never saw any critical article on PHFI, any investigative article on PHFI.
And if I don't forget this, in our call you had mentioned that like 2 specific newspapers were really pushing the PHFI. So can you?
So yeah, very importantly, and let me tell you what those news. One is the Hindu, which is supposed to be a leftist paper, and other was the Indian Express. Now, if you look at the coverage, now since I have been writing about PHFI since 2011, I did a lot of scanning of these newspapers and whatever was published on PHFI, and I actually went through my scrutiny. So I found that the Hindu, which is a leftist paper, supposedly a leftist paper, N. Ram was long-time editor of the Hindu. He was actually, I don't know, many people know, he was a member of the Communist Party. Sometimes, I don't know whether he continues to be a member of the Communist Party, but he's a well-known communist. And he was also a member of the Communist Party of India. Now, Hindu, I found that their coverage was never critical about PHFI. And they were always supportive of PHFI and K. Srinath Reddy. And another paper was the Indian Express. Now, Indian Express is supposed to be a liberal paper. So now you have the 2 papers which are, which would be called, can be described as a darling of the left liberal elite. One is the Hindu and other is the Indian Express. And both have been very supportive of PHFI, even though the Indian Express is better known for its investigative reporting. I never saw even one single critical piece about PHFI. And you will continue to see a lot of columns written by K. Srinath Reddy in PHFI and other people associated with PHFI. So PHFI has been set up not just by the government and the Gates Foundations and other globalist criminals, but also by the media, by the total complicity of the media. And even after I published my investigative pieces beginning 2011, I never saw any interest in by the mainstream media in actually probing the affairs of the PHFI. So that's why I call it a deep state. And most importantly, you have to see that it's the billionaires club now. Now name one billionaire who's not associated with PHFI directly, indirectly. Everyone. And I should name others also, like you have Godrej. Now Godrej is also on the board of the PHFI now. Godrej is there. Now, Rati Godrej is on the board of PHFI. Now, Cyrus Poonawalla is one of the billionaires who has now benefited the most from this whole pandemic thing. And he's the largest vaccine manufacturer in the world, by the way. And he's the closest buddy, one of the closest buddies of Bill Gates.
Actually, Gates's picture hangs in his office as well. That's how close they are.
Yeah. So for the last, I think, 7 years, they are collaborating in, in developing this pneumococcal vaccine and marketing this pneumococcal vaccine. They have huge operations together in Africa. And there are reports actually where their vaccines have actually done a lot of damage, cause infertility in the African women. Of the vaccines manufactured by Serum Corporation, Serum Institute of India, of Cyrus Poonawalla, who is the closest, very close partner of Bill Gates.
You're referring to the Talwar vaccine there, right? Which was sponsored by the Rockefellers. That was manufactured by Serum and then covertly used in Kenya. That's the one you're referring to.
There is one article written by Jacob Puliel, who is a very well-known doctor. And he has written a lot on vaccines and, Gates Foundation involvement in HPV vaccine scandal, where 7, young girls were who actually they died because of the complications of being administered those vaccines. So Jacob Puliel has written an article in the Sunday Guardian, and you can check that, where he says that vaccines manufactured by Serum Corporation actually cause infertility in African women. In trials. So that article is there. And Serum Corporation is a huge partner with Gates Foundation in Africa.
Yeah.
So this is something we must keep in mind. And they are one project that I can mention at the moment. There may be others, is pneumococcal vaccine, on which they have been partnering with Gates Foundation. And Gates, has been, if you just check the Gates, Bill Gates' own channel on YouTube, you can see he has a video praising Cyrus, Poonawalla.
Yes, and I've seen his own website as well. If you see the grants page, the Gates Foundation has given, I think, at least 2 or 3 grants to the Poonawallas and Serum Institute for developing different vaccines. So yes, that they work very closely behind the scenes.
Yeah. And now, there's an interview again of other Poonawalla, who is the son of Cyrus Poonawalla, and he says that my mentor is Bill Gates, and he has been warning me since 2015 that there's going to be a pandemic, and so we were prepared and we made this vaccine, and now we are the billionaires. And he benefited the most. Cyrus, his wealth has now gone up to, I think, 1,33 crore or something. So a 25% increase in wealth in the last 4 months. And he is the largest vaccine manufacturer in the world. India is the vaccine capital of the world. India is not the victim of the vaccines mafia. India is itself a part of this mafia. India is actually vaccinating Africa.
That's true. One in 2 children in the world are vaccinated with Serum Institute's vaccine.
It's the largest. Absolutely. It's the largest vaccine manufacturer in the world by volume, not by revenue, but by volume, largest. So India, and the Indians are vaccinating the world and vaccinating themselves. So when we talk about vaccines, we must keep that in mind, that it's the Indians who are collaborating with these globalist criminals like Gates Foundation and injecting poison into people. Now you can see this whole unholy haste in which they are actually manufacturing it. They themselves say it takes 10 years to develop a vaccine. It's a very regulated process and all. And now within months, within weeks, they are trying to develop something. And other Poonawalla is self-implicating himself. If you see what he has been telling the journalists, he's saying that even though we have this tie-up with AstraZeneca for making these COVID vaccines and Oxford University, but we are already manufactured. We have already a stock of about 1 million. So which means that they are already, without human trials. Human trials are going on. They are not complete yet, but they've already a stock, and we are doing it at personal risk. So
and they're portraying it as if he's doing some philanthropic thing by letting go of
Yeah, and you can see that they are the largest beneficiaries of this whole scam. So, so I'm saying in PHFI and Gates, all these connections. So PHFI must be recognized as the so-called executive committee of India's billionaires, sitting right inside the government of India, deciding the public policy and the public health administration, and that explains the completely compliant, completely supine and response of the government of India and the state governments to this whole coup d'etat that has taken place in the last 4 months, where democracy has been destroyed, where Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister, is working as a henchman of the Gates Foundation, of the Bill Gates and all. So this whole devastation that has taken place in India in the last 4 months is a culmination of what has been happening for the last 14 months of, allowing the Gates Foundation to set up a whole infrastructure of global health imperialism inside the government of India, implanted into government of India across states. So many states are now were actually on board right from the beginning. Their chief minister on board. I talked about Narendra Modi, who was a Gujarat chief minister, who was on board, and that's why it's ridiculous. And then I talked about the media, which is I talked about the Hindu, which is a leftist paper, more aligned with the communist parties of India, socialist parties of India, and you have the liberal paper, the Indian Express. So that's what I call the elite consensus. I have used this word in one of my articles in 2018. I've said that this is an elite consensus which actually brought about this global health imperialism to India, which means all parties are on board. Congress is there, BJP is there, Biju Janata Dal was there, Naveen Patnaik was on board right from the beginning. He gave land in Bhubaneswar and PHFI was set up. And now you see this K. Srinath Reddy is a health advisor to him for many years now. And they are wreaking havoc with public health policy in Odisha. And that explains also why Naveen Patnaik actually went for continuation of the lockdown after the first round, because there were no cases in Odisha. In the first round, even at the end of the first round, there were hardly any cases in Odisha. And Naveen Patnaik, the chief minister, actually asked for the extension of the lockdown. Why? Because K. Srinath Reddy is the advisor to Naveen Patnaik, the chief minister, for many years now. So then you have PHFI also has a school, public health school in Hyderabad, which was earlier United Andhra Pradesh, and the chief minister was YSR Reddy. YSR Reddy was on board, by the way. He was the Congress chief minister, and he was on board, and he gave land in Hyderabad to PHFI. Then Sheila Dikshit in Delhi was on board. She gave land, but then land went into dispute. So they have now set up in Gurgaon, which is a satellite city of Delhi. So all across in Bangalore, I think they were given land as late as I think about 3 or 4 years ago, and Manmohan Singh continued to help them. This is what I learned through my sources, that Manmohan Singh they got land in Bangalore. Now, importantly also, during this COVID crisis in the last 4 months, who are the people who are raising alarm, who are adding alarm and being alarmist in all the media coverage that you see?
Kapil, so just a minute, before we go into the detail of how these people are controlling the current crisis right now, I just want to highlight the implications of what you said till now, because what we are saying to the viewers is basically that the globalists who even I've studied and the names you brought up, which have been involved in the PHFI, till now I didn't know that Cyrus Poonawallas on the board as well. But you mentioned the Mahindras, they are basically the Mahindras.
Cyrus Poonawalla, I'm sorry. Cyrus Poonawalla is not on board on PHFI, but he was actually given an award by Bill Gates a few months ago, late 2019 at ICMR. So ICMR, as I told you, has a deep connection now with PHFI as well as Gates Foundation, as well as CDC also. I think they had they signed some kind of agreement also with CDC. Not with CDC, I think with CDC they have long-term arrangements, but also with this Anthony Fauci's body, which is part of NIH in the US. Anthony Fauci's body, which is called some NIE.
National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases.
Yeah. So they also had an agreement. So Poonawalla was given an award by Bill Gates at an ICMR function. ICMR's award. It was an ICMR award. So what I was saying is, even if, for example, Azim Premji is one billionaire that I just want to touch upon. He may not be directly involved, but he was also involved in actually giving some private investment to the Manipal, and Manipal also has funding from Narayan Murthy. Narayan Murthy has a connection with PHFI. So indirect connection with either Bill Gates or with PHFI. But most of the billionaires are actually represented on the PHFI board. And Poonawallas and Azim Premji may not be there, but they're indirectly involved. So that is what I was saying.
All right. Thanks for that clarification. But all the members that we mentioned who are connected or indirectly connected, I can say that the Godrej connect into the Globalist because they basically go to trilateral commission meetings, which was another spin-off of the Roundtable Secret Society. Then he brought up Nandan Nilekani's wife, Rohini Nilekani, sitting on the board. Nandan's been involved since the beginning in pushing the Aadhaar project on behalf of the Globalists. And then Nandan basically is part of Bill Gates' Giving Pledge as well, which is like this billionaire thing that they have signed up to make the billionaires give their wealth away to push the globalist agenda worldwide. Aziz Premji is on that as well. Then, this Biocon chair, Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw is sitting on that. So once we start to go into these connections, I'll be doing a lot more work on this, in detail exposing how these people connect with the globalists. But we can see that all the frontmen for the globalists who are basically involved in pushing the globalist agenda in different ways are very well represented on the PHFI board. So, what we're saying is literally that the global deep state has hijacked India's at least the health policy and many other things as well through the PHFI. So before we go into the implications of how these people are currently driving the crisis right now, one last thing I want to touch on is that, you openly accuse the PHFI for fraud. And, I just want you to go into that incident and how they dealt with you in response.
Okay. So, in 2012, I think, after, as I told you, they were not complying with the RTI Act until 2011, when they were hauled up in the Central Information Commission, and then Central Information Commission passed an order in 2011. That order everybody should see that order also, because that order itself is a very severe indictment of PHFI and the way the government set up PHFI as a absolutely fraudulent body. And because that order is also important, because it's my kind of findings which I actually submitted to the Information Commissioner Shailesh Gandhi, which also formed an important part of that particular decision of the CIC. So after they were compelled by the CIC to comply with RTI, and this compliance hasn't been like any other, the compliance of any other body. They are doing it only, as a very deceitful activity, because they have always, they've never given any information about their board meetings, etc. until now. So in 2012, I filed this RTI, a number of RTI, in 4 RTIs I filed, because I was doing a decisive piece on investigative piece on PHFI, which I left off doing in September, October 2012, because I was fed up with this whole thing. Nobody was paying attention, and I left off. And then that piece I published later on in 2014. Okay, it is on my blog site. So I asked them about their board the composition of their board in 2006, and they sent me an absolutely forged document. Now they could have simply given me the names of all the people who were sitting on the board in 2006 on a plain paper. I mean, they could have just sent me, these are the names which were there on the board. But he actually forged a document. He actually sent me a photocopy of a document, of an original document, supposedly, putatively or ostensibly original document, signed by, himself, who he was the president of PHFI. So he signed in August 2006. So he signed it as if he signed this document in 2006. He sent me a list of the people who were sitting on the PHFI board in 2006, and he signed the document, which means it was actually a document that came out of the PHFI board meeting itself. And it has all the names of Rajat Gupta, the chairman, and all the health secretary and other people who actually was sitting. Amartya Sen was on the board. A.K. Shivakumar, a person close to Sonia Gandhi, who was on PHFI board.
And Amartya Sen directly has a connections to the Rothschild family. I mean, like, it doesn't get more blatant than this.
Also with Rockefeller, with Lincoln Chen. Lincoln Chen is also one guy who has been represented right from the beginning on the PHFI board. He's still there. And he is the chairman of the China Medical Board. So what is the connection between India and China now that we are talking about the war between all the tensions between India and China? So the Rockefeller Foundation is one connection between India and China. So Lincoln Chen sits on the board of the China Medical Board. He is one of the Rockefeller Foundation persons, and he's also sitting on the board of the PHFI right from the beginning. So Lincoln Chen also set up some body. If you go to their, the China Medical Board website, you can see that Lincoln Chen also has a connection with Amartya Sen, by the way. So this is an incestuous body. All these guys are connected with each other. Wellcome Trust, Gates Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, all these are, connected with each other. So, K. Srinath Reddy sent me this document under RTI, signed document, back in August 2006. Of all the people who were sitting on the PHFI board, and I found that it took me hardly 5 minutes to see that it was a forged document, because in August 2006, Rajat Gupta was described as consultant to PHFI or something, which he became later after he actually ceased to be the managing partner or the managing director of PHFI. So even though he became that later. So in August 2006, he must have been the managing partner or whatever his position was in McKinsey. But he was described as something that he became later. And there were 2 or 3 other things which were discrepancies in that. So I could see very clearly that this is a totally forged document, that he forged it. And he need not have, because he could have just sent me the names of the people who were there on the PHFI board. So I immediately actually circulated this document through email to all the public health people that I know of who were on my mail list, and I told them this is a forged document, and they also admitted it. Fine, and then they said this is a typo, basically a clerical error, and this is a ridiculous answer that they gave me. And I also filed a first appeal under RTI. Nothing happened, because the person who actually response to your first appeal is a PHFI man himself. And then I planned also to file a complaint to the to the Information Commission, but I didn't do this because later on I was told, so fed up in I think September, October, that I left off this whole thing, this whole project of writing on PHFI, investigating further, because I was doing it so alone and I was so isolated in this, that it has taken so much the toll of my psychological toll of me, that I just left off. And in any case, at that time in 2011, already it was taking more than a year to actually go through this whole complaint process, appeal process in the Information Commission. If you file a complaint or the second appeal at the Information Commission, it would have taken perhaps a year for them to actually listen to your to hear your appeal. So I left off. I also had planned to file a FIR against Reddy, but then I met a lawyer and he gave me some very rigmarole of a procedure. He said nobody will actually register your FIR if you go alone to a police station. Maybe you'll have to go to the magistrate and all, and nobody was there to help me again. So again, that plan did not actually go through of filing an FIR. So he gave me an absolutely forged document. This document can be seen. Anybody who is interested in looking at this document can go to the ManyLife website, and my article is still there. You can see that article along with this document. It is actually uploaded along with that article. So that document can be seen. It is a photocopy of the composition of the PHFI board prevailing in 2006. So you can see that. It's a forged document. That's one. Second, obviously, the fraud that they committed in 2013 when Narayan Murthy was the chairman. He became the chair. He became the second chairman of PHFI after the exit of the Rajat Gupta. Rajat Gupta's exit in March 2011 also had something to do with my article, because I published in March, and after that some public health activists belonging to the medico friend circle actually tapped the government. They made some noises about, how come this guy who is going to be arrested now by the FBI is actually chairing this body called PHFI, where all the top government guys, Montek Singh Ahluwalia, the deputy chair of the planning commission, the TK Nair, who was the secretary to the Manmohan Singh, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, health secretary, etc. They were all sitting on the board of PHFI under the chairmanship of Rajat Gupta. So how is it that possible that this guy is going to be arrested for securities fraud? And he was arrested. I mean, he was arrested, he was convicted, he was jailed for 19 months. He went to jail for 19
Actually,
months.
Gates and others, made public statements for them to reduce his time in jail, saying that he's doing so much fantastic work abroad.
Yeah. Also, Ashok Alexander. Ashok Alexander was a representative of the Gates Foundation in India. He was also, I think, heading the Gates Foundation in India, and he was also one of the persons who actually set up the PHFI, Ashok Alexander. And so Ashok Alexander was there. And McKinsey, must remember that McKinsey has been the henchman of the Gates Foundation for globally, not just in India, across the world. And their rise, the Gates Foundation rise to the global health is actually goes hand in hand with the rise of the McKinsey Foundation. So McKinsey Foundation is one of the most important global consulting firms hired by Bill Gates to actually, advance his global health agenda.
And they are hired by the pharmaceutical industry as well. The pharmaceutical industry and McKinsey have done a lot of work together to basically promote and push their products.
Absolutely. All the pharmaceutical firms, Merck and Abbott and all those firms. Merck obviously was involved in this HPV scandal in which 7 children died in India, which was, the clinical trials or whatever, where Gates Foundation actually funded that vaccination drive. So Merck was involved in that. So all these pharmaceutical firms are also allied with McKinsey, and McKinsey is obviously pushing this public-private partnership across the board, not just in healthcare and elsewhere. So public-private partnership is something which public-private partnership is one very important area of interest that I had, which actually, of which PHFI investigation is just one part. I also did other articles on public-private partnership in other sectors, like in Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor, road sector, etc. So public-private partnership again is an agenda pushed also by the United Nations agency, United Nations system, because United Nations has been completely honeycombed by these globalist criminals like Gates Foundation, Clinton Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, etc., George Soros Foundation. So United Nations itself has been, pushing this whole policy of public-private partnership, which have been a huge scam in India, by the way. This whole scam has been blown up in our faces in terms of this ILNFS. ILNFS is a huge scam in India. So many scams are there in PPPs. We must remember that. In roads, in ports, in airports. In airports, recently GVK has been arrested. The GVK has been booked only, the day before yesterday. The GVK guy who actually developed the Mumbai airport, international airport. So PPP is full of scams, by the way. Even in physical infrastructure, where the government of India has some kind of policy, no legislation, but policy, because you must remember PPP policy never went through the scrutiny of the parliament or the CAG, proper scrutiny of the parliament, because you never came up with a legislation. The government of India should have come up with a legislation on PPP. Yes, because you are restructuring the government of PPP is like a policy, a global policy of implanting deep states across countries in all governments, and pushed by the United Nations and directly by the United Nations.
Yes,
and
definitely. That's been my conclusion after the research as well. And summing up what you're saying is basically the culmination of alleging the PHFI of fraud was they basically filed a lawsuit against you, like a defamation suit. So can you speak a little bit about that as well?
Yeah. So in 2018, late 2017, I was contacted by a person who had worked for PHFI for about 5 years. He was Vice President, Research and Policy. And I can just reveal his name. His name is Ramanan Lakshmi Narayan. And Ramanan Lakshmi Narayan was associated with PHFI. And he, contacted me. He had left PHFI some time ago, and he contacted me in late 2017, and he said that I have some material on PHFI. This FD scam that took place, where most of the funds, corpus fund was wiped off, and there was no accountability was fixed by Reddy and by Narayan Murthy. Narayan Murthy was a second-time chairman then in 2018. So Narayan Murthy, you must remember that Narayan Murthy has been deeply involved in PHFI. He was making private equity investments also in healthcare in Manipal. Manipal was actually also involved in bioweapons research, as we later found out. Azim Premji was also one of the investors in Manipal Health. So these private equity investments themselves were very dubious by Azim Premji and by Narayan Murthy. So Narayan Murthy has been the chairman of PHFI twice, once in 2011 when he became the chairman, and again he became the chairman after the exit of the Mahindra in 2015, I think. So in 2018, so he told me, this guy who contacted me, the vice president, Ramanan Lakshmi Narayan, that this scam has taken place where most of the funds have been wiped out. They actually put some money in some FDs, fixed deposits in some public sector banks in Mumbai, even though they are based in Delhi, and through agents. And those agents actually wiped off, siphoned off the money, and I think about 100 crore or something. And now they don't have any money to set up these public health schools, even though some of the public health schools are already functioning for many years now. But they were, I think, probably running on rented premises. So he said now they don't have the money to build upon those plots of land that they own across the states.
Wow.
So I didn't do the article immediately, but I did this article then later on in February 2018. And I did this article. Also, by that time, I was contacted by another guy from Kerala who actually said that, PHFI has designs on his institute. He was working for that institute, medical institute. And he said that, PHFI has pulled off this absolutely illegal kind of arrangement with that medical institute, some kind of tie-up, and this is done totally unlawfully. So I did this article covering both these issues. One is this fraud which took place in 2013, I think, in the financial year 2013, when Narayan Murthy was the chairman. He was having his first stint as a PHFI chairman. And another was this illegal kind of tie-up between PHFI and this medical institute in Kerala. So that article is published in 2018. And after that article, that article actually again, nobody picked up. And nobody in the mainstream media picked up any of my pieces on PHFI, right from 2011 until now. So for 14 years, I have been a voice in the wilderness, completely alone, isolated, and nobody has written anything about PHFI. So in 2018, this article was published, and I actually sent it through my mailers to people, and people I knew, and I actually opened a Twitter account in order to have, some kind of mileage for this article so that people read about it. And then I received, in the middle of about 2-3 months after the publication of that article, I received this defamation from Khaitan and Company. I received this notice, legal notice of defamation, that you have been defaming against PHFI right from 2011, and now remove all your articles and everything, or pay us 2.5 crores of money, as damages. So this article, this Khaitan and Company works directly for Narayan Murthy. Narayan Murthy was the chairman then. So I have reason to believe, obviously, it's Narayan Murthy himself who sent this defamation notice through Khaitan and Company. And I was obviously very kind of scared at that moment that am I going to be targeted or not? But also surprised that, they are actually targeting a blogger whom nobody knows. Who knows about me? Nobody. I mean, I'm almost an anonymous blogger. So, because I have not been working for mainstream media for many years. So they are sending a defamation notice to a blogger. And for the last 9 years, I think my views on my blog site won't be more than a little more than 2 lakh or something. So I am not a mass media. I am not a somebody who is read by a lot of people, and yet they did it. So that is the kind of pain they must have felt by my articles, which means they hit the right spot. That's what I believe, because I am the only one who actually exposed the design of the Gates Foundation, and perhaps also because what was coming, what was in store for them, what was they were preparing for in 2018. Maybe they were already preparing for this pandemic thing and the Great Reset thing and all the fraud that was coming in 2020. Maybe they were preparing and they were rattled by that. So this was sent, and then I took help from some lawyer to send a response to that. And I said that obviously I'm not taking down any of my articles. And I did an article in 2011 with the directly in which Narayan Murthy directly participated. The second article that I did for Money Life Foundation, my second article published in Money Life Foundation 2011, that was done with the participation of both Narayan Murthy, who had just taken over as the chairman of PHFI, and also the PHFI itself, which means Reddy himself. So they took part in my article, which means they responded to my question. I included those questions in my article. So I said, how come my articles, you were taking part in my articles and now they suddenly became defamatory? So I am writing the truth, and obviously I'm not going to take down my articles. And then that lawsuit did not go through. They did not actually file a lawsuit. So that remained a threat. And that is something that I received. So there are two important things. One was obviously the forgery that took place, and others the fraud, which actually took place under the chairmanship of Narayan Murthy and under the presidentship of Reddy in 2013. So funds were stolen in the financial year 2013-14. Nothing happened. Now, why is it that no government action? Now, it's the government people who are supposed to be sitting on the PHFI board. Health Secretary is sitting there, and they took no action. Narayan Murthy remained the chairman. He became the chairman again in 2015. And Reddy has remained the president right from 2006. So now you can again see the kind of power, the kind of clout they enjoy over government of India. No minister has the power. No prime minister has the power to take action against PHFI. In 2017, again, they were caught up, government took away their FCRA license. And again, nothing happened. It just, the drama went on for a few months, a few weeks, and then their FCRA was actually restored. Nothing happened. So government took no action. It was all a drama, which was happening in 2017. And, they must have received huge amount of funding. Somebody told me, somebody who is in the public health domain, he said that soon after, a day or two after their FCRA license was restored, they received huge amount of funding from abroad. Huge amount of funding. So I have a feeling that they were already preparing in 2018. In 2018 they were already preparing some kind of huge seismic event in India, which we now see, unfolding and experiencing very painfully.
Throughout the decade, India's concerns about the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and its corporate partners' influence on the country's national immunization programs grew. In 2016, the steering group of the country's National Health Mission blasted the government for allowing the country's National Technical Advisory Group on Immunization, the primary body advising the government on all vaccination-related matters, to be effectively purchased by the Gates Foundation. As one steering group member noted, the NTAGI Secretariat has been moved out of the government's health ministry to the Office of Public Health Foundation of India, and the 32 staff members in that secretariat draw their salaries from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. There is a clear conflict of interest. On one hand, the BMGF funds the secretariat that is the highest decision-making body in vaccines, and, on the other, it partners with the pharma industry in Gavi. This is unacceptable.
So, I mean, like now coming to a kind of end to this, let's analyze how the PHFI has been instrumental in coordinating and directing the response to this so-called pandemic that has, basically destroyed all our freedoms right now.
Okay, I was talking about Ramanan Lakshmi Narayan, who actually contacted me, whom I described in that article as a whistleblower, obviously, because he gave me the tips about that scandal, FD scandal that took place in PHFI, where the money was stolen under the chairmanship of Narayan Murthy, the great advocate of corporate governance, and this guy Reddy, the president of PHFI. So, Ramanan Lakshmi Narayan was in the news in March, I think, or early April, when he gave this alarmist, interviews to the Indian media that, so many millions of people are going to be affected by coronavirus, and so many millions are going to perhaps a huge amount of fatalities that we will see in the next few weeks. Now, Ramanan, then I remembered, was associated obviously with PHFI. He was the one who gave me that information, and so that is one thing. And he's also associated with the University of Washington. University of Washington is the home to IHMI, which is the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, again a body set up by the Gates Foundation, which gave the fraudulent models on which these genocidal lockdowns were based. So IHMI again has a revolving door with WHO, because IHMI's founding board members are Reddy. One is Reddy and other is this Tedros of the WHO. So IHME's founding board members are Reddy of PHFI and Tedros of WHO. It was set up in 2007, by the way. So now Ramanan Lakshmi Narayan gave this alarmist mathematical model, which was given huge amount of coverage by the India Today television, by other channels in India. So again, you can clearly see that people associated with PHFI were helping this whole Gates agenda in India, the evil agenda of Gates in India. Initially they needed this momentum that they needed to build up to justify the Prime Minister's decision to impose a lockdown in India without any rhyme or reason, because there were hardly any cases. Even now, if you say India, 16,000 people have died or 17,000 people have died in 5 months, it's hardly anything. Every day death rate in India is 26,670. That's a figure that people must remember. I found this figure. Nobody is actually asking for this figure. How many people actually die in India? Because we have death rate. So there must be some daily death rate also. 26,670 people die in India, normally in India, every day. Now, this coronavirus has killed officially, even though that figure itself is dubious, about 17,000 people in 5 months. Nothing. It's not a pandemic. It's not an epidemic. Nothing. So no lockdowns were necessary. But initially, in March, when you needed to actually give some kind of justification for these genocidal lockdowns. I call them genocidal because they left no stone unturned in actually killing the informal economy, the people, daily wage workers, and everybody, and the kind of scenes we saw. So Ramanan Lakshmi Narayan gave this alarmist mathematical model that these many people are going to be killed. He was associated with PHFI. That is something that I must underline. Then you see all the statements that are coming from people associated with PHFI, including Reddy, as well as other people like Giridhar. There's one guy, epidemiologist, their chief epidemiologist of PHFI, called Giridhar. He's also known to me because I wrote about him in 2012. He was defending when I actually found that he was engaged in forgery. Reddy was engaged in forgery. He was the one. Giridhar was the one who actually defended him in the public health community. So he was also a known figure to me. And again, I saw some statements made by this Giridhar of PHFI where he's saying that, there's going to be a second wave. So they're already now talking about the second wave. Again, all the people associated with Gates across the world are talking about the second wave. And Gates himself is now talking about the second waves in November. So second wave is coming now. So again, all the alarmist elements that have been, injected into the public discourse, all those peoples who did that are traced to the Gates Foundation, to the Bill Gates. So that is one thing. Second is the Government of India's response itself. The committee that they have set up under ICMR has been completely honeycombed by Gates Foundation, as I told you earlier, because ICMR was the one which investigated this, HPV vaccine scandal in Andhra Pradesh and Gujarat, and they did nothing. Finally, what happened to the report that they gave to the government? Gates Foundation was not indicted by the government. I mean, they were not taken to the court. They were not prosecuted. And now the Government of India is not only listening to the Gates Foundation, it seems all through these 4 months, the Prime Minister himself is taking directly, taking orders from Bill Gates. For so many, there has been so many reports where we saw that Bill Gates is directly talking to the Prime Minister on a hotline, appreciating his work, giving him award. He also gave him some award, I think some months ago, or perhaps in 2019. So Prime Minister also took part in CEPI, which is this coalition of epidemic preparedness initiative or something that they formed.
Before we go to CEPI, I just like to point out the thing you mentioned about ICMR. The parliamentary committee that was set up to investigate the whole HPV vaccine scandal, they literally accused the ICMR of colluding with PATH in order to put the HPV vaccine on the Indian schedule. Like they were doing that trial to basically like generate some kind of evidence so that that vaccine would get introduced in the Indian schedule. So the parliamentary committee actually accused ICMR of like colluding with the NGO. Most people don't know that.
That's why I'm saying ICMR is now virtually a Gates controlled body. ICMR is absolutely a Gates controlled body. I'm telling you. And in November of last year, Gates was actually giving awards in a ICMR function to Cyrus Poonawallas. Lifetime Achievement Award to Cyrus Poonawallas, as well as to that Mazumdar lady, that Kiran Mazumdar Shah, 2 people. And so ICMR, he was on the ICMR kind of platform and giving awards. And ICMR should have no business dealing with the Gates Foundation, which was involved in this whole HPV scandal. So ICMR is now virtually a Gates controlled body actually. Again, ICMR actually also has this, in that function itself, you see the news report. They also signed some declaration of intent agreement with Gates Foundation as well as NIH, the Anthony Fauci's body, that Anthony Fauci's body of infectious diseases, which means, and then ICMR has a very long-term relationship with CDC also, the US CDC. So CDC again was involved in this, bioweapons research inside this Manipal University, in which you have the funding from the Narayan Murthy as well as Azim Premji. So you clearly see the links. And ICMR again now has this body, which is the apex body of the Government of India dealing with this pandemic. And inside that body you have the Reddy of PHFI sitting inside. So PHFI again has been given that pride of place inside the Government of India's response.
And just to highlight the connections between all this, I don't know if you've seen this article or not, but I think there's an article in India Today called "Much Ado Over Vaccines." So basically, this article was like trying to cover up for all the basically controversy and scandal that the Gates Foundation has generated, like since the HPV trial in India. And literally, if you see that article, they have handpicked like all the people that we are mentioning right now to basically like cover for what the Gates Foundation has done. So if you see that article, Soumya Swaminathan is basically like approached for a quote. You have K. Vijay Raghavan who's approached for a quote, and you have Srinath Reddy as well who was approached. So literally like all these people are taken in their articles, like they've used all their ammo to silence the controversies and criticism that took place around the PHFI influencing India's immunization policy. And it's surprising for me because you were talking about CEPI. So the Department of Biotechnology in India was actually like one of the founding partners in CEPI, which is something Gates created in order to prepare for an epidemic to come in advance. And like around 350 crores of our taxpayer money was infused into that whole thing. So if you see the Indian scientists who basically got exported to CEPI, you find the same names. You find Soumya Swaminathan, you find K. Vijay Raghavan. It's literally like a revolving door where they are going from place to place and controlling the entire health policy from what I've seen.
Yeah. So Soumya Swaminathan was the Director General of ICMR, when she facilitated this three-way tie-up between ICMR, PHFI, and IHME. IHME again was involved in those fraudulent models, epidemiological models, which have been disastrous, and again a Gates-funded body. And then, Soumya Swaminathan was asked very recently by NDTV journalist Ravish Kumar that about lockdowns, because now she's in WHO. I think last year or something she joined WHO as a chief scientist of WHO. So she was asked about whether WHO had some role to play in recommending these very draconian lockdowns. So she said, no, WHO has nothing to do with a straight face. But she failed to mention that there's a revolving door between WHO and IHME itself, and also ICMR. So she should have said that, I facilitated a tie-up between ICMR and IHME. IHME has this guy, Tedros, who is now the Director General of WHO. And I was in ICMR, which is controlling the Government of India response to this whole COVID thing, a pandemic. And I am now sitting inside WHO. So she didn't say that, but she knew, and she knows she's a fraud. I mean, she lies through her teeth, and she also lied through her three teeth when she in public she would say that vaccines are safe. And off camera, or where she thinks she's not being seen, she would say that these are totally not in our control vaccines. We don't even know what we are making, what we're injecting into people.
There was an ad where she was saying that the vaccine surveillance systems are really set up and working properly. And
not just an ad; it was covered by one channels. It is on YouTube. You can see that. I think that Dale Bigtree has covered in one of his
That video went very viral where she's literally lying in public, and then
where she's saying that we have no control over the making of these vaccines. We don't even know what is there inside them. No checks and balances, no safeguards, nothing. So that's why I'm saying this is a corrupt system, absolutely corrupt system, and there's a revolving door. And everybody has some other connection with the Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation. It's impossible not to have that kind of connection. So that is these are the kind of things where you see the imprint of the Gates Foundation. So let me just again say that PHFI does not have now direct representation of the Gates Foundation for some years, but it has the direct representation of McKinsey. McKinsey continues to control PHFI, and McKinsey is the henchman of the Gates Foundation. So
and obviously, like all the people who are sitting on the board, if you try to find their connections, they eventually connect back into the globalist system. So it's still
globalist,
them. I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean, if you're summing this whole thing up, basically, like just one last thing I'd like to mention about CEPI was that CEPI was literally created by Gates in anticipation of this pandemic. And they funneled money into this, program called Disease X, that they basically anticipated this surprise outbreak. So they were actually funneling money into those vaccine programs. And the implications of this basically are taxpayer money. 350 crores of that was put into this in order to make vaccines, which are now going to be forced on us. And, they have something called INCEPI as well, which you clarified when we spoke last. It's basically like the same thing between them. And even the PM CARES fund, a lot of that money has been used to basically give it to the vaccine manufacturers so they can make the vaccine. So our money is literally being siphoned off and stolen via taxes, which are obviously not voluntarily. They're taken at the point of a gun. And then they're being put in order to enrich these vaccine manufacturers who are totally in collusion with the Gates Foundation. And it's like a very, very large intermeshing network. So I'm sure there's a lot of explosive information you've broken down here. And the thing I find most disappointing is that you've not got any coverage. So I want to do everything I can to basically give you a platform and make sure your message is heard. But tying it up, I mean, most Indians might be thinking that what can we do about this? Because I don't know if these implications got clear, but in the beginning you were mentioning that you had a stint with Arvind Kejriwal as well. So, and then during the course of the interview, you spoke about how the left is also on board with this. So I guess just to make it clear, can you just highlight how all the political parties and all this political spectrum in India is totally on board with this, and why we don't have any hope from at least like Aam Aadmi Party or Congress or BJP in this current environment? Because, people sort of take political sides. If you're sort of bashing Congress, they'll be like, okay, but BJP at least remove the FCRA license from there. So, if you can just clarify that all political parties are on board with this, that'd be great.
Yeah, I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that all political parties, including the left, including the so-called socialists, Lohiites and all that, they're all on board, and nobody was ever going to offer any resistance to this whole fraud that is unfolding before our eyes now. So, and again, I have this kind of confidence, and I talked about this elite consensus because of my work on PHFI. So in PHFI, I saw that state governments were involved. Obviously, that was the UPA 1 government when they actually implanted this criminal network into the government of India. Other political parties were involved. BJP's Modi was involved.
And if you can just mention before I forget, you said that Narayan Murthy sent like this blackmail kind of tweet to Modi. Can you speak about that?
Yeah. So when they actually took away his FCRA license, he sent a letter to Modi, which was again given coverage in the media. And in one of these magazines, and I think the week where they published this letter, an article based on that letter that Narayan Murthy sent to Modi, asking him to, restore the license, that we are doing such a great work in public health and all. There is this picture of, Narendra Modi participating in the Bhumi Pujan of the plot that was given to PHFI to set up this public health school in Gandhinagar, when, Modi was the chief minister of Gujarat. So this picture was given great prominence in that article. So obviously this picture is actually, I think, I imagine this picture was used by Narayan Murthy through this journalist as some kind of bargaining chip. You are part of this right from start. You are part of this fraud called PHFI, this criminal syndicate that we have set up. And now if you opt out of it or you walk out of it, then we are going to blow the whistle on you. I mean, we are going to actually create trouble for you. So this is the kind of threat which is implicit in that article that Narayan Murthy wrote to Modi. So that's one thing. So which means that basically Modi was on board right from the start. Then I mentioned Naveen Patnaik. I mentioned YSR Reddy. He was the chief minister, Congress chief minister of United Andhra Pradesh before it was split into Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. Then you have Sheila Dikshit, who gave land. Shillong also, I think Shillong also they set up one public health school. I'm not sure whether, I think they haven't given the land in Shillong, but perhaps it's running on some rented land. In Bangalore, I think they have acquired land. And this guy, Ramanan, told me that they have, I think, huge amount of lands across India. So it's also a land scam. So PHFI is also a land scam because they're sitting on huge amounts of land, given away, free of charge, by the way, free of charge. All these largest, the government largest that they enjoy, it's all free of charge actually. So many contracts that they received, public health contracts and public health, projects, etc., etc. All the benefits in cash and kind that they received from the government. So all to help this government set up, establish itself as some kind of deep state, unaccountable government. So that's one. Second, so there is a political elite consensus in India in which political parties are involved, including the left, as I told you, because left hasn't made any noise. Now, left is the one which has been making this noise since Modi came to power from 2014, that Modi is a fascist. He's going to, set up a fascist Hindutva state in India. Now, Modi has done something similar to that. And they were saying that, there is a undeclared emergency going on in India under Modi's regime. And now Modi has done something which is much, much worse than what Indira Gandhi did in 1970s of, declaring the emergency or clamping the emergency. He has done something even more dangerous. I think 1,000 times more dangerous, more sinister than what Indira Gandhi did. But why is the left is not blowing its whistle on that? They should be saying it's a scamdemic, it's a plandemic with Gates Foundation. Why are they not blowing their whistle on that? That's my question. Why the public health community, which is mostly aligned with the left? So left parties are complicit. It's because left parties, CPI, CPM, they're all complicit. And don't forget, left parties were the partners with UPA1 when Gates Foundation was given this huge favor by the Manmohan Singh government. That was 2006 when left parties were part of the government, sitting inside the government. Why did they not blow the whistle on Gates Foundation? Gates Foundation was given this whole, room inside the government of India in 2006 when left was part of the central government, part of the coalition, UPA1. That's the question you should ask. Why is Naveen Patnaik not opposing? Why are then you have Socialist Party like, this Mulayam Singh Yadav's party, Samajwadi Party, etc. They are not. Can you name one single political party which is raising its voice against this whole business of the Great Reset and the globalist coup d'etat that they have actually pulled off across the world and destroyed democracies across the world? You don't see any opposition in India from the political spectrum, from the media, from the so-called NGOs, from the public health sector, from the medical community. Across the board, you see total compliance, no voice of opposition, absolutely none. And whatever voice of opposition is meaningless actually. They are just saying that, okay, you should have done it. Modi should have actually, given some time to these, migrant workers to return to their states, and then he should have, imposed the lockdown. That's all they're saying. It's all ridiculous. Why are you not saying this pandemic itself is a fraud? That's the point that you have to say. Who is there with you? Are there left parties with them? Why are the left parties not with the people? They are not with the people. They are with the Gates Foundation. Why? Because of this SDG agenda. This whole United Nations Agenda 2030, because they believe that this UN Agenda 2030 is some kind of socialist utopia that is going to come. The Great Reset, they believe, these fraudsters, leftist fraudsters, socialist fraudsters, they believe that this is some kind of socialist utopia that is being set up. And by whom? By the capitalists themselves, by Gates, Soros, by Rockefeller Foundation, Rothschild. They are setting up some kind of socialist utopia in the world where everybody will be equal, and can't they see this transhumanism and all that bullshit where they have destroyed societies and, putting up, asking people to put up masks, face masks, and completely destroyed the solidarity between people, the social relations between people, everything they have destroyed. Democracies they have destroyed. Constitution have been in abeyance now. So all the sections of the political spectrum, all including the Dalit politics, for example, all those who say that we will defend the constitution of the Bhimrao Ambedkar, Babaji Bhimrao Ambedkar, why are they not raising the voice? Because the constitution has been thrown to the dustbin. Now, for the last 4 months, the entire constitutional machinery is in abeyance, is in suspension. The constitution is, our Supreme Court is not even convening physically. They're convening through video conferencing. There's no parliament. There's no session there's no monsoon session. Why is the parliament not convening? Because of this stupid bad cold, a severe cold. I mean, a cold which is not even as severe as a seasonal flu. I mean, this is a totally, this COVID is absolutely, it's not even as severe as a seasonal flu in the Northern Hemisphere. And all the deaths, I'm telling you, ICMR is involved in counting the deaths. They are, relying on RT-PCR tests, which are totally fraudulent, I'm telling you. So if they are telling you the 17,000 deaths have been recorded, this is totally fraudulent. Most of these deaths are due to comorbidities, pre-existing diseases.
That's something I totally second as well, because even I've done a lot of content on my channel exposing the tests and how they're inflating the death numbers systematically through the guidelines, where even the people who are testing negative on the PCR, if they assume to have symptoms, I mean, who the hell before dying is not going to gasp for breath? And that's one of the symptoms. So, it's just an easy thing to lump a lot of people in there. So even that small figure of 17,000 is a highly inflated one. But man, I mean, you've laid down some really, really explosive stuff. And again, like, I just want to stress that, like, how insidiously, like, these forces wanting to take the world towards a global government, like, fascist, communist, what are you going to call it, a dictatorship, which I've exposed in length again in my Agenda 21 video, where I've laid down how this UN Sustainable Development Agenda that you're talking about is actually a plan to bring in the technocratic world government system, where, every aspect of our life is controlled and all freedoms are out of the window. They've so insidiously, like, hijacked every element of our country. And most other countries that I research, I find the same thing. If I have to tell you one thing, like, just thank you so much for having the integrity all this while, for, like, keeping on pushing with the information even when no one was interested. And I, like, really respect you for, just pushing on with that, and, like, keeping on going regardless of, like, whatever has been thrown at you. I mean, again, like, I'm mind blown as well by, like, a lot of the things you've said, because of how it coincides with a lot of the research I've done as well into the same thing and the same characters that we went over. So, Kapil, I want to do everything to help you. Just let viewers know where they can find you and what they can do to support you in any way, like, in terms of sharing the information monetarily, like, whatever you want, just, like, tell people how they can help you.
Well, I don't need any monetary help. I just want, I think I have a blog post, a blog site. It's called kb4u.blogspot.com.
I'll put all the links in the description, whatever you want me to share.
Yeah, so I actually write post blogs on that. You will find a lot of information, a lot of links on that blog site. I also am on Twitter by a different name. So I don't know whether I should reveal that, because I would be shadow banned, and I'm sure I'm already being shadow banned because. So let me just also, maybe you can also give that. I'll just pass that to you,
sure.
And you can just give the link on your platform.
I'll do that. Definitely.
So yeah, so that's all. I think now that I've spoken with you, it's a lot of burden off my chest, and I believe that you have gathered a very good network of people. Of a community of people who are working on all these globalist agendas and inquiring into them. And I hope that this is something that they will spread through the society. I think if people don't become critical of their government and of all these fraudsters, the globalist criminals, then India is doomed. As a society, we are going to be enslaved. India is actually, I believe that India is primarily responsible for this global coup d'etat. If you see across this coup, you will find that Indians are everywhere. In every way, they're actually helping these globalist criminals. So India has become a society which is wedded to untruth and falsehood and fraud and corruption. So it actually is a sad commentary on our own society. We have become a society, a very corrupted, perverted society, and we have no relationship now with truth, actually. And we are helping these globalist criminals. And if we had said no, if we said that yes, we can't give our consent to this fraud, to the Gates Foundation, then this coup, the global coup, would not have happened. So Indians are primarily responsible, actually. Indians are primarily responsible. They are the reason why this global coup d'etat is taking place. They are the most populous state in the world which has actually totally been compliant with the globalist criminals in pulling off this pandemic thing and the Great Reset thing.
Definitely.
So Indians are primarily responsible. So that's why people like you are necessary. You ought to be actually getting your message across. So I wish you all the luck.
Thank you so much, Kapil. And again, we are kind of ending on a negative note, but what I encourage everyone to do is, if you understand the severity of the information that we're discussing here and the imminent threat we face, if we as a people, as a nation, don't stand up and just reject and start not complying with the crap that's being thrown at us right now. If we don't do that and we don't take all the effort to spread this information and help awaken our fellow Indians. We are literally, almost at the point in a couple of years, they're talking about bringing the system in by 2030, and they literally want to take over our minds via like connecting that to the cloud and like literally controlling our perception. So we are really walking into dangerous territory, at least in this decade. And if people think it's bad right now, it's just going to get like worse and worse and worse until we finally stand up and like say no to this. So I just encourage everyone in the audience, like from the bottom of my heart, please do everything you can to get this out, because it's really, really important information. And I mean, things look bleak right now, but at least I know you kind of don't have that kind of optimism from what I've seen, but at least I have some hope that I see, although a small percentage of the population, but I see the resistance, at least in the people who are starting to understand this. And there's a lot more interest in this information now because of the draconian nature of like what's being thrown at us. So I would just say we need to keep riding that momentum and get this message out to people so that we can do something and intervene in this whole process. Like the reason it has gone on till now has been ignorance, like drastic ignorance on the part of the population, which influences their perception and then it doesn't result in action. So the whole point of this conversation is to reprogram people's perception so that they can align with truth and then intervene in this process and stop it and like reclaim our freedoms and sovereignty back. So again, Kapil, from the bottom of my heart, like, just thank you so much for doing this and breaking everything down and really exposing in great detail how these forces have like literally hijacked and controlled India's health policy and a lot more different areas. And again, like, I just encourage viewers again, like, please do everything to support Kapil's work as well as like get this message out to people. Any final thoughts you want to leave people with?
Well, all I want to say is that, this whole business of political spectrum, the left-right paradigm is destroying societies. It's crippling them, it's paralyzing them, it's putting them in a state of sclerosis, actually, total inaction. If you continue to actually act as a person aligned with Congress or BJP or left, then you are going to continue giving all the opportunity to the globalist criminals to take over. So political spectrum, I have always believed, is a fraud, because it's like a dashboard in the hands of the elite to control the public, to control the populace, to control the populations, because they give you these false labels of left, right, center, liberal, socialist, etc., and then they control you. These are false labels because then they can co-opt you. So they can co-opt you in their own agendas. So everybody is co-opted. Like left is now co-opted across the world. I mean, not just in India, across the world. Why is the left not posing any opposition to this globalist agenda? Even in UK, in US, and other states, in other countries. So I think the political spectrum is a fraud. People should rise above it. People should forget about their Modi Bhakti. Modi Bhakti is one of the primary reasons why Modi Bhakts are primarily responsible for this genocidal lockdown in India, for this draconian lockdown in India. So Modi Bhakti has, led India towards disaster. So you should rise above that. Think of your own country. No political party is your friend. They're all aligned with globalist criminals. BJP is part of, these conservative, many people don't know, BJP is part of this conservative party association across. Congress is, part of this so-called liberal party. Liberalism is a fraud, we can see. The right is a fraud, the left is a fraud. Why? Because if they were not a fraud, they would be with the people. They would be with the people. They are not with the people. And that's why you should not be with them. Because they are not with you. BJP is not with you. RSS is not with you. Congress is not with you. So my last message is this, that you should rise above these political spectrum, the left-right paradigm, and think yourself as a member of the society. Not even as citizen is a good term, a fancy term, but you should remember that citizens are given rights by the Constitution. But when you think of yourself as a human being, as a member of the society, then you think of yourself as somebody who is endowed with natural rights. Natural rights. You can call them God-given rights also. Not by the Constitution of India, which came into being in 1950. By the rights we enjoy as human beings, as communities. So that's how you should see yourself. And then you can see through the the evil agenda. That's my last message. Thank you.
Wow, I mean, I literally get goosebumps because that's been the entire message of this channel, is to realize that your rights don't come from government. Government is slavery, and it's a system that's set up to basically, siphon our energy off and basically steal from us. It's institutionalized theft. So what people need to understand is that your rights don't come from a group of people that has monopolized and formed an institution which is basically like a legalized gang of thugs. But your rights come from God or nature, whatever you want to call it, and you have the right to self-ownership as well as the property acquired, and anyone initiating violence against that is always wrong, and that includes the state as well, which initiates violence in the form of taxation. So again, I mean, just mind-blowing interview overall, and just thank you so much for coming on, Kapil. I hope the viewers got a lot of insight from this interview, and again, just please do everything you can to help this get across to people. All right, I'll take your leave.
Thank you to Johan. Thank you to Johan. Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.